Hi, everyone. My name is Craig Durr. I'm a senior analyst with Wainhouse Research. Now, if you're not familiar with our company, Wainhouse Research is a marketing analyst firm as well as consulting firm that focuses specifically on enterprise communications. You can think of the devices, the services, and all the technology that enables you, your employees, and your teams to communicate and be productive. I'm with you today because I want to share with you some findings of some recent research that we did in cooperation with NTT. This in particular research is about actually reframing how you think about workplace communications. In particular, we really honed in on the employee experience that drives this type of success. Now, this information is available to you after this particular webinar. You can find it downloadable in the form of an ebook at this website. Now, one of the great things I'm excited about in sharing this with you is I have the opportunity to also present this in coordination with Scott McMaster, who's the Managing Director of Americas for NTT. Scott, how are you doing?
I'm great, Craig. Thanks for enjoy being a part of this. It's a good discussion. It's a great topic, and I think it's going to really relate to a lot of IT people out there and a lot of enterprises based on what's going on, especially since we've all lived through the COVID-19 pandemic and what that's done to these areas that you're going to cover today.
I think you're spot on. And what I'm really excited about too is here's an opportunity for this dialogue for you to bring some practical insights that you're seeing with your customers and clients. Feet on the street is what I like to say, right? Let's make sure that what we talk about here is mapping up. Great. Well, let me go ahead and start talking about this. Again, the focus of this research was to help IT administrators, IT decision makers, to help visualize their employee experience and how that influenced workplace communications. Now, what Wainhouse does is we have a very simple framework that we created for this model to help us think about this. Now, internally, we call it the 3Ws, but in particular, it focuses on three areas: the workforce, the workplace, and the workflows, and the perspective that takes place from the IT administrator. Now, by capturing these end-user perspectives, it allows that IT administrator to kind of organize their points of views to help influence what they're thinking about in terms of workplace communications. Now, I'm going to pause for a second. And Scott, I want to ask you this question. Are you seeing these same type of topic areas influencing what you're doing in terms of your cloud communication solutions?
Yeah, we are. And, if you go back, this has kind of been happening, and these three areas have been critical even prior to COVID.
Right.
Companies have been moving in this direction, as they've been transitioning to the cloud. They've been trying to consolidate communication technologies, streamline workflow processes. There's always been this concept of work from home that's been slowly gaining traction even before COVID. And what's happened now with COVID coming into play, everybody work from home, it's accelerated. And these things have just become more critical to focus on as you've got to accommodate the experience from working from home. How do you manage workflows when you've got a distributed workforce? How people aren't face to face anymore. So they become really important, and you've got to look at your technology ecosystem and how that's coming into play with all these aspects. So we are seeing these three areas are really critical, and if you can address them, then it can really put you in success for getting to where you want to be as a future end state.
I think you've captured that very well. Tell you what, why don't I go ahead and take a step into each one of these? I'll share some of the high-level findings. Again, you can find more about this in the ebook, but then we can have a dialogue back and forth about this. You made a great comment about work from home, and let's talk about that. The first one I would love to talk about is the workplaces. Now, I think let's level set. You hit a fact right on the head, which is prior to 2020, about 75% of the workforce actually worked from an office, a company supplied desk, a company supplied space. That's where they would go in. Work took place at a workplace. But of course, 2020 changed that. Now, what really took place was actually it did an extension. It actually hyper elevated this transition that was already taking place. And that was the idea that people were starting to expand what they considered to be their workplaces, whether it be from home, whether it be a third-party location like a coffee shop, or even in transit, or finally working in a company-supplied spaces. But now more than ever, why we go into the office, when we go into the office, and even where we go into the office is fundamentally changed. Now, like I said, the ebook has more details about that, but let me just hit one of these. Why people go into the office. This is some results from a survey that we did in Q4 of 2020, where we talked to end users and wanted to understand in this current state where you're in this bit of hybrid mode, what are the fundamental reasons that's driving you to go to the office? Well, three of them were top of mind, and they were really centered on things they had to do in person there. There was a task they could only do in office. They may perhaps wanted to meet someone, and that was the chosen designated space to meet in person. Or more practically, people needed access to lab equipment or a certain piece of office equipment, and they had to go in and do it in person. People were becoming, in essence, very tactical about why they're going into the office. But Scott, I think the really great thing we saw is actually if you look down a little bit further below that, end users were starting to understand that the office represented more than just a place to do work. And in particular, it was the idea that it was connecting with the culture of the company. It was the idea that this is a place where interactions fuel creativity and innovation. In a lot of ways, what was taking place within that end user community is they were subconsciously recognizing the office as what I call a hub and club. I mean, it's kind of a funny term, but the idea is I'm going to go to this hub to connect, or I'm going to go to this club space so I can meet with the company, with my peers, with my manager, even more so, my mentors, people that are helping me understand the business. Things such as innovation, mentorship, and culture. This is one of the driving factors we found when we looked at the macro level, what was taking place within the workplace transition. Now, this is something that we found within our data set. Scott, I'd be curious to see from your client's point of view, what are some of the ways you saw the workplace evolving in this 2020 timeframe?
Yeah, a lot of organization went through the same moment when everybody had to work from home. And there was probably an element where they were allowing a certain percent of their organization to work from home, even prior to COVID. But COVID educated every enterprise on what was possible remotely. You know, what you
Right.
thought you couldn't do, you actually realize you could do. So that's now changing the strategy of how enterprises are thinking. Do I need as much real estate? You know, how do I design those offices? And that office designs and to revolve around huddle spaces and culture and, you know, bringing people to work together and being more collaborative, that's been in place for some time. But now it's just
Sure.
accelerated. It's just given every enterprise the experience to say, I can do this remotely. Even what people thought was an office task before, they've figured out how to make it not an office task today. You know, and they
Right.
had to because that was the only option. So every
Sure.
company now is, you know, first and foremost, how do I improve the experience regardless of where you are from a communication standpoint? How do I adjust workflows regardless of where you're operating from? And how do I still give people that opportunity to come back and connect in with the culture to collaborate with people when you really need to be in front of a whiteboard? You know, you want
Right.
to have that experience of having that conversation. And I think a lot of employees, especially younger people that are coming into the organization, miss that ability to have a conversation around the kitchen or, you know, sit in a coffee table, to have those ad hoc conversations that you really don't do when you're virtual. So
Right.
every company is trying to figure out, how do I address those two things now, with the way that they're thinking about communications, their office space, and also how to connect people.
But yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, it is all about, again, understanding why I'm going into the office, but then again, also leveraging technology or other workplace communication so that I can bridge those gaps when I'm not in place in person or in a certain location. I'm curious, what about NTT yourselves? How are you guys right now approaching your view of the office space internally?
Yeah, listen, probably we're very similar to all of our customers. You know, we had a large percent of our employees work from the office, nearly 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think we just recently did a survey internally, and what was clear is that I think over 84% of employees want to come back to the office, which was great. So 84% want to come back to the office, but they don't want to come back 5 days a week. Okay, so I think what we're finding is people want to have that connection. They want to come back to the office. They want to interact with their colleagues, different functions. They want to connect in with the culture, but they still want the flexibility to work from home. And
Yeah.
then that is actually driving within NTT, and I think with our customers as well, it's driving the technology decisions about what they give people to use as a way to be engaged, to be connected.
Right. I mean, that's a great segue to this next part of the framework. I'll go ahead and move ahead if I may. That is about the workforce. I think you are hinting around something that I've talked about here, and I highlighted in this blue box. Employees are going beyond just being motivated with work being about a paycheck or a pension. There really is a drive to connect to purpose, and they want to understand what's going on in the business. What is their role in the business? What is the business doing outward bound, and how can they participate in that? It's really a powerful statement that shows how things are transitioning. Off to the left, I think that is probably one of the primary drivers we found. And that was these generational insights that we were able to uncover. A lot of different ideas. But let me share this one idea based upon that graph there. Several years ago, it was very common to have three generations in the office. In this case, in 1994, we're talking about three generations, and it makes sense. The one that's retiring, the mainstream one, and the new one coming in. But just prior to where we are now, somewhere in the late 2017 timeframe, 2018 timeframe, we actually started acknowledging we had up to 5 generations in the office. There was a lot of things going on. Now, you guys, I'm sure as a large organization, see this. You have a lot of what people call millennials in there. And make no doubt, large, influential generation. There's nothing to deny about that. But what's really interesting is this. On the top end, people are retiring later. People are working longer. They enjoy working. They might be driven because they have longer health, longer lifespans. And then at the same time, younger generations are coming in that same extended time frame. Generation Z is the topic that we're starting to hear a lot about. But that still expands to up to 30 years old in today's environment.
Yeah.
That's what's key we found in this discovery, kind of talking back to what you were talking about. This new breed of worker wants to participate in the purpose of the company. And they're asking, they're hungry to do that. In the previous discussion, we talked about mentorship. Think about them also trying to understand how they contribute. It has a lot to do with them having a fulfilling experience. This is one of the key takeaways that we had in talking and looking specifically at the workforce. They want to have a fulfilled experience. Well, how does that take place? They need to be empowered. This is where the role of workplace communications technologies came into play. The ability to enable him through a digital technology allowed them to stay in touch, to stay within the realm of knowing what was going on, and to participate, be productive, and collaborate. It was a nice frame that this digitally adaptive group of individuals were willing and excited to take on these technologies so that they can see that as a way to participate in the business. It's one of the things I thought was really fundamental in what we discovered in this whole thing. Now, I want to put this back to you, Scott. This is, in a lot of ways, people can say ivory tower in research. I want to understand feet on the street, what's going on, and if you're seeing a similar shift in what's taking place, and then how are you addressing that shift?
Yeah, so, it's interesting. Unfortunately, I don't fit within the Generation Z. I wish I could say I did, but I don't. But, a lot what we're seeing today is, we're obviously seeing the multiple generations within our organization. And the value that brings to a business is phenomenal because you've got so much knowledge and experience. You've got a different way of looking at things. So it's fantastic to really be working across these different generations across the business.
Right.
But you also see with Generation Z and the younger employees that they're bringing how they live in a social world. They're bringing that in to the business world in terms of how they message and how they chat and how they communicate.
Yeah.
But what I'm also seeing is that they're very passionate about the strategy. You've got so many people today that are focused and really want to know what's the strategy, what are we doing moving forward? And so many questions coming up. And more importantly, these same individuals want to be a part of improving the future. It's kind of, they want to understand my role, the strategy and success. It's kind of three areas that they're really focused on. What's the strategy? What's my role? And how am I contributing to success? And they're starting to bring up questions. They want to be a part of improving the business. They want to take lead. They want to contribute. They want to influence. And it's really exciting to see that. And giving them the communication tools to allow them to channel information through, to create teams, and really work with other people around the company has been fantastic. So I'm kind of excited about what the different dynamics has delivered to the business environment, because I think it will accelerate and make businesses successful as they look forward.
I love it. There's that energy, right? It's
Yep.
fueling a lot of conversations, which is part of being productive, part of moving forward in terms of innovation. Well, let me go ahead and wrap up with that third leg of this particular tripod that I talked about, and that's about workflows. Now, when we were looking at this space, it became very clear to us that it kind of hedges itself towards what you see in terms of the workplace and actually understanding how people are working. Now, take a step back. Workflows are all about the tools, the processes, the technologies to get something done. It could be sequential. You and I right now, in terms of an email thread, are following a workflow process in terms of how we might have prepared for this discussion today. But what became really evident is that people were getting distracted. They were becoming subservient to a lot of communications, a lot of scheduling, a lot of noise in the air, and it was hard for them to get work done. One of the key things we find at a macro level for people to help enable successful workflows is to treat people according to a clustering of the type of work they were doing. In this case, we have two here that are very common that people know and are familiar with, and that's going to be the knowledge worker or the frontline worker. Now, by understanding what type of role they are, we see that people are able to really hone in those workplace communications to fit those needs and become very relevant to what they're trying to do in this space. Find out what your employees need, and then you can cluster the information, the governance around this policy, and make it relevant to them in terms of their digital needs. Now, I understand NTT does use personas in a very similar way in terms of how it tries to implement the right cloud communication solution. Is that something that you can share more about, the persona model?
Yeah. Every company out there is either implemented or thinking about or is already a long way down the road in terms of their digital transformation strategy and shifting to the cloud. And what we've found, our experience is some people have always focused on the technology first. And I think what that's resulted in is trying to fit a square peg into a round hole because you haven't understood the needs of the business and of the employees. And you're right, people fit in the clusters. There will be a large percent of people that will operate pretty similar, but then you've got different business application, different roles. And without understanding that, often you're trying to put the wrong technology into that employee's hands
Right.
to deliver the right outcome. And one technology solution is not going to be the right fit for every application. Maybe employees need access to two different technologies. As long as they communicate well together and they know how to use them, that could be the right fit for that employee. We're very agnostic in how we look at our customers, but we always look at the persona first to understand that the right technology ecosystem is in place to deliver the right outcomes to the right people.
I think that's fantastic. You're right. You can't try and force technology on a need. You need to find out what that problem is, and you can really find it from finding what we're talking about here, the end user perception of what their needs are, what they're trying to accomplish, and what their barriers are in the process. That's fantastic. Mm-hmm. So these are different ways of gathering insights, right? This is a great framework, and I shared with you as an audience how, as an IT administrator and IT decision maker, you can think about some of these macro trends, but now you apply this to your own environment. And so now you have these insights, and you've got this in a nice organized way that you can think about the workforce, the workflow, or the places that they work. What's the next steps to do that? Well, Wainhouse does subscribe to a pretty straightforward model. Leverage these insights, create alignment, then go through the preparation process, and then finally execution. Now, each one of these have an important element for you to consider along the way. And I'm sure you've done very similar things in itself. But what's key here is this. There's a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot of things going on, both in terms of the timeline to get to that end game, as well as beyond that end game as well too. This is what's key. This is where the planning and the insights help to de-risk the deployments, to stay on top of this, to stay insightful. Now, I'm not going to go through so much about what these different elements are, but I do want to turn this over to you, Scott, because what I'm talking about actually is a core competency of what NTT can bring to this conversation. The ability to help gather those insights and help bring this into an IT decision maker's thought process of what they think about in terms of their next steps. Tell me about what NTT can do or what their thoughts are about this process.
Yeah, you need to spend a lot of time up front. You know, every organization today is complex in terms of the technology ecosystem that you have today, people working from home, the different type of workers that lean more on mobile devices and laptops, the people that need to use both. So you've got all these different dynamics that are happening. And then you throw COVID into the middle of it, and it becomes even more complex because you need to do it at a speed so you can continue to maintain the employee experience. And that's top of mind now for most IT organization. How are my employees experience their day-to-day jobs? What are we giving them? How are we making it easier? So we spend a lot of time and effort up front with customers understanding, you know, what's on-prem today from a technology standpoint, what's already in the cloud. How do you get two different technology ecosystems working together? And it's always a journey. You know, you can't do this overnight. You've got to map it out, and you've got to look at your personas, and you've got to address every persona at a different stage of that journey. And we've seen clients try to aggressively attack this, and it comes with a lot of risk, and it comes with a lot of, you know, pausing and let's take a step back and restart. So we put a lot of effort in this, and I think you'll have a conversation with Adam coming up next that talks to our cloud deployment framework and how we position that and how we go through that with customers, so we can really map out whatever it is, a 1-year journey, a 2-year journey, but it's got to take into account all the different dynamics that can, you know, deliver the best experience to the company.
Right. That's fantastic. From my point of view, I think this is one of the key elements. It is a complex process. There are a lot of variables, and there's nothing better than you can do than have a good technology-centric, process-centric, persona-centric partner to help you through this process. Experience matters here, and you got to grab that experience where you can find it. Well,
absolutely.
I think this brings us to the end of our conversation, Scott. I really want to express my appreciation to you for sharing your insights. Again, we do have this ebook available for download. The URL is available to you, and you can find it afterwards as well. But what's more important, you can find out how NTT can also help support you in this process as well, too. This is research. This is what we find out talking to people. I encourage you, though, to talk to the experts, the people that are on the street, people that actually are with customers and clients, understanding the needs and taking these insights and developing them to actionable plans. Thank you so much for your time, Scott. Thank you for joining us and sharing some insights. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig. It's been great.
Great. Everyone, take care. We hope to see you next time.